Have you ever noticed that the more you try to prove your worth to someone, the less they seem to value you? You answer quickly, you stay available, you give endless chances, you explain yourself over and over again. Yet somehow, the respect you want never arrives. And then something strange happens. The moment you stop chasing, the moment you stop convincing, the moment you start walking away, their behavior changes. Suddenly, they're paying attention. Suddenly, they're reaching out. Suddenly, they seem concerned about losing you. Why does this happen? The answer has nothing to do with playing games. It has everything to do with human psychology, boundaries, and self-respect. In this video, we'll break down exactly why respect often appears only after you create distance, and more importantly, how to walk away in a way that protects your dignity, rebuilds your confidence, and completely changes the dynamic. Most people believe that if they just try harder, give more, and prove their loyalty long enough, they will eventually earn the respect they are looking for. It sounds reasonable on the surface. After all, we're taught that effort creates results. So when someone becomes distant, inconsistent, or dismissive, the natural reaction is often to increase effort. People start sending longer messages, making more compromises, offering more understanding, and becoming even more available. They convince themselves that if they can just show enough patience, eventually things will change. The problem is that respect doesn't work that way. Respect is not something that appears because you sacrificed more than everyone else. It is not a reward handed out for tolerating poor treatment. In fact, the opposite is often true. The more you tolerate behavior that hurts you while asking for nothing in return, the more you teach people that your standards can be ignored. Every time you accept less than what you truly need, you send a message. Not through words, but through actions. And actions are always louder. Think about it. If someone repeatedly cancels plans, ignores boundaries, or only reaches out when it's convenient for them, yet you continue to make yourself available no matter what incentive do they have to change? From their perspective, the relationship continues exactly as it is. They receive your time, your energy, your attention, and your understanding without having to offer the same level of investment in return. This is why chasing respect rarely works. The more desperately someone tries to be valued, the more they communicate that they don't fully value themselves. And people can sense that. They may not consciously realize it, but they respond to it. When your entire focus becomes earning someone else's approval, you slowly place your own worth in their hands. The turning point comes when you stop asking, "How can I make them respect me?" and start asking, "Am I respecting myself?" That question changes everything. Because self-respect shows up in the standards you maintain, the boundaries you enforce, and the behavior you refuse to accept. It means recognizing that your time has value, your feelings matter, and your presence is not something that should be taken for granted. When you begin acting from that place, something powerful happens. You stop over-explaining, you stop chasing, you stop trying to convince people to see your worth. Instead, you start living as if your worth already exists, because it does. And that shift alone changes the entire dynamic. The people who truly value you will rise to meet your standards. The people who don't will reveal themselves. Either way, you gain something far more important than their approval. You gain your self-respect back. One of the most surprising realities of human psychology is that people often don't fully recognize the value of something until they experience life without it. This doesn't happen because they are bad people. It happens because familiarity has a powerful effect on perception. When someone becomes a constant presence in another person's life, their efforts, attention, and emotional support can slowly become expected rather than appreciated. At first, every message, every act of kindness, and every moment of support may seem meaningful. But over time, if that access remains unlimited, people can begin to assume it will always be there. They stop noticing the effort behind it because it has become part of the background. What was once appreciated becomes expected. What was once valued becomes routine. This is where distance changes everything. Distance interrupts patterns. It forces people to see what they could previously ignore. When someone is always available, there is no reason to think about their absence. There is no opportunity to feel the impact of what they contribute. But the moment that availability disappears, reality becomes impossible to avoid. Suddenly, the conversations aren't there. The emotional support isn't there. The constant reassurance isn't there. And for the first time, the other person is confronted with a question they never had to consider before. What does life feel like without this person in it? This is why creating distance can produce such a dramatic shift in behavior. It's not because distance is a manipulation tactic. It's because distance reveals value. It allows someone to experience the contrast between having access to you and not having access to you. Without that contrast, appreciation often remains dormant. Many people make the mistake of trying to explain their value endlessly. They tell others how much they care. They describe everything they do for the relationship. They hope that if they say the right words, the other person will finally understand. But understanding rarely comes through explanations alone. People understand most deeply through experience. A person can hear 100 speeches about your importance and still take you for granted. But a period of genuine absence can teach them more than months of conversations ever could. The key is that the distance must be real. It cannot be a performance designed to provoke a reaction. If you're constantly checking whether they're noticing, constantly waiting for them to reach out, or secretly hoping every minute that they'll come running back, then emotionally you're still trapped in the same cycle. Real distance means stepping back and allowing reality to unfold without interference. It means resisting the urge to fill every silence and solve every discomfort. It means allowing people to experience the consequences of your absence while you focus on your own life. And whether they finally recognize your value or not, that distance serves another purpose. It gives you clarity. It helps you see the relationship more objectively. It reminds you that your identity is bigger than one person's attention. And sometimes the greatest benefit of walking away isn't that someone else finally sees your worth. It's that you finally see it yourself. When people decide to walk away from a situation that no longer serves them, they often feel an overwhelming need to explain themselves. They want the other person to understand exactly how they feel, why they're hurt, and what led them to this decision. They rehearse conversations in their mind, they prepare long messages, they gather examples from the past, and deep down, they hope that if they can finally find the perfect words, everything will suddenly make sense. But here's the difficult truth. People who consistently ignore your feelings are rarely waiting for a better explanation. Most of the time, they already know what the problem is. They know when they've been inconsistent. They know when they've crossed boundaries. They know when they've taken your effort for granted. The issue is often not a lack of information. The issue is a lack of action. This is why over-explaining can become a trap. The more you explain, the more you unintentionally place yourself in a position where you're seeking permission to leave. Instead of making a decision, you start defending it. Instead of enforcing a boundary, you begin debating it. And once a boundary becomes a debate, its power starts to disappear. Many people don't realize that excessive explanations often come from a hidden desire for validation. They want the other person to agree with their decision before they feel comfortable making it. They want acknowledgement, understanding, or even an apology. While those things can feel satisfying, they are not necessary for you to move forward. Your decision to protect your peace does not require unanimous approval. Think about how confident people communicate boundaries. They are clear, calm, and direct. They don't spend hours trying to convince others that their feelings are valid. They don't argue endlessly about why a line has been crossed. They recognize what they need, communicate it, and act accordingly. This doesn't mean being cold or disrespectful. It means understanding that clarity is more powerful than lengthy justification. A simple statement delivered with confidence often carries more weight than a 20-minute explanation filled with emotion. When you continue explaining after you've already made your point, something interesting happens. The conversation shifts away from the original issue and becomes focused on defending your perspective. The other person may begin arguing details, challenging your memories, minimizing your feelings, or turning the discussion into a negotiation. Suddenly, you're no longer discussing your boundary, you're defending your right to have one. That's why silence can sometimes be more powerful than another explanation. Not because silence punishes anyone, but because it demonstrates certainty. When your actions align with your words, there is nothing left to prove. You don't need to convince people that you're serious. Your behavior communicates it for you. The strongest exits are rarely dramatic. They don't involve endless arguments or emotional speeches. They are often quiet, calm, and firm. They come from a place of self-respect rather than desperation. And when you stop trying to make everyone understand your decision, you free yourself to actually live it. That's when your boundaries stop being words and start becoming reality. One of the biggest misconceptions about walking away is that it's supposed to change someone else. Many people create distance, hoping the other person will finally realize what they lost, come back with a new attitude, and give them the respect they were missing all along. While that can happen sometimes, making that your primary goal creates a dangerous problem. Your happiness remains dependent on someone else's response. True growth begins when walking away stops being about them and starts being about you. The moment you leave a situation that has been draining your energy, you are faced with a choice. You can spend every day analyzing their behavior, wondering if they miss you, checking for signs that they're thinking about you, and waiting for some kind of validation. Or you can redirect that same energy toward rebuilding the parts of yourself that were neglected while you were focused on keeping the relationship alive. Many people don't realize how much of themselves they've lost until they step away. They've abandoned hobbies they once loved. They've ignored personal goals. They've neglected friendships. They've put their own growth on hold while investing nearly all of their emotional energy into someone else's approval. When that relationship or connection becomes the center of your world, your sense of identity starts shrinking. Your mood depends on their attention. Your confidence depends on their validation. Your peace depends on their behavior. That's a heavy burden to place on another person. Rebuilding yourself means taking that power back. It starts with asking simple but important questions. What goals have you been postponing? What interests have you ignored? What areas of your life need attention? The answers to those questions often reveal exactly where your energy should go next. Instead of spending hours thinking about someone else's actions, invest those hours into becoming stronger physically, mentally, emotionally, or financially. Read more, learn new skills, exercise consistently, pursue opportunities that excite you, reconnect with people who genuinely support your growth. These actions may seem unrelated at first, but they create something incredibly important: momentum. Every step you take toward improving your life reminds you that your future is bigger than one relationship, one disappointment, or one person's opinion. The more progress you make, the less dependent you become on external validation. Ironically, this is often when people become most attractive and respected. Not because they're trying to impress anyone, but because they're no longer chasing approval. Their energy shifts from seeking attention to building a meaningful life. The most powerful transformation happens when your focus changes from "how do I make them see my value" to "how do I fully realize my value?" That question changes everything. Because when you're genuinely committed to your own growth, whether someone comes back or not becomes far less important. Your confidence is no longer tied to their choices. Your happiness is no longer controlled by their actions. And that's the real purpose of walking away. It's not creating a loss for someone else. It's creating an opportunity for yourself. An opportunity to rebuild, rediscover who you are, and become the kind of person whose self-worth is rooted in personal growth rather than external approval. One of the most critical moments comes after you've created distance and begun reclaiming your self-respect. For a while, there may be silence. Then suddenly, something changes. A message appears, a phone call comes through, an apology is offered. Interest that seemed completely absent before now feels stronger than ever. This is the moment that catches many people off guard. After spending so much time feeling ignored, unwanted, or taken for granted, it's natural to feel excited when attention finally returns. The recognition you've been hoping for is suddenly right in front of you. It can feel like proof that your decision worked and that everything is finally going to be different. But this is where patience becomes essential. One of the biggest mistakes people make is confusing attention with transformation. The two are not the same thing. Attention is easy to give. Real change is difficult. When someone fears losing access to a person they've become accustomed to having in their life, they may temporarily increase their effort. They may communicate more often, become more affectionate, or make promises about the future. In that moment, their actions can seem convincing because they're driven by strong emotions. The problem is that emotions are temporary. Anyone can act differently for a few days or even a few weeks when they're afraid of losing something important. The real question is whether those changes continue after the emotional intensity fades. This is why it's important not to rush back at the first sign of interest. Instead of focusing on what someone says, pay close attention to what they consistently do. Words can create hope, but patterns reveal truth. If someone promises better communication, do they actually communicate better over time? If they promise greater effort, does that effort remain consistent when things become comfortable again? If they claim to respect your boundaries, do they continue respecting them when they don't get their way? These are the questions that matter. Real growth is not measured by dramatic declarations. It's measured by repeated actions. It shows up in consistency, accountability, and a willingness to maintain change even when there is no immediate reward for doing so. This requires emotional discipline on your part. You have to resist the urge to accept potential as proof. You have to stop falling in love with promises and start evaluating behavior. That doesn't mean becoming cynical or assuming people can never change. People absolutely can change. But genuine change takes time, effort, and commitment. The strongest position you can take is one of observation rather than desperation. Instead of immediately lowering your standards because attention has returned, allow time to reveal the truth. Let actions speak for themselves. Because the goal isn't simply to receive attention. The goal is to experience respect, consistency, and genuine effort. And those things cannot be proven in a single conversation or a sudden burst of interest. They can only be proven through time. That's why protecting your standards after you've walked away is just as important as having the courage to walk away in the first place. At the heart of every unhealthy dynamic is usually one powerful emotion: fear. Fear of being alone, fear of being forgotten, fear of losing someone who has become emotionally significant. These fears are completely human, and everyone experiences them at some point. The problem begins when that fear becomes so strong that it starts controlling your decisions. When you're terrified of losing someone, you naturally begin acting differently. You become more cautious about expressing your needs. You hesitate to set boundaries because you're afraid they might leave. You ignore behavior that bothers you because confronting it feels risky. Little by little, your focus shifts away from what is healthy for you and toward keeping the other person comfortable. Without realizing it, you begin negotiating against yourself. You accept less than you deserve. You lower standards you once considered important. You tolerate situations that create stress, confusion, and emotional exhaustion. Not because you believe it's right, but because the possibility of losing the relationship feels worse. This is where the balance of power changes. The person who is most afraid of losing the connection often becomes the person with the least influence within it. Their decisions become driven by fear rather than self-respect. Their actions become focused on preserving the relationship at all costs instead of evaluating whether the relationship is actually serving them. The moment you're willing to lose what no longer aligns with your values, something remarkable happens. Fear begins to lose its grip. You stop making choices based solely on avoiding loss. Instead, you start making choices based on what is healthy, respectful, and sustainable. Your standards become clearer because you're no longer willing to sacrifice them for temporary comfort. This doesn't mean you stop caring about people. It doesn't mean becoming cold, detached, or indifferent. It simply means recognizing that no relationship should require you to abandon yourself in order to maintain it. True confidence is not the belief that you'll never lose someone. True confidence is knowing you'll be okay, even if you do. That mindset changes everything. When you understand that your happiness, identity, and future are not dependent on one person's presence, you begin showing up differently. You communicate more honestly. You establish stronger boundaries. You stop chasing approval because your sense of worth is no longer tied to someone else's opinion. Ironically, this is often when respect begins to appear. People tend to respect those who respect themselves. They notice when someone has standards. They notice when someone is willing to walk away from situations that compromise their dignity. Not because it's intimidating, but because it demonstrates self-worth. The greatest freedom comes when you realize that losing someone is not always a tragedy. Sometimes the real tragedy is losing yourself while trying to keep them. The willingness to walk away is not about rejecting others. It's about refusing to reject yourself. It's the decision to place your values, peace of mind, and self-respect above the fear of being alone. And when you reach that point, you discover something powerful. The moment you stop needing someone to stay is often the moment you finally regain control of your own life.